Firstly, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, TicketSolve, and they're our digital sponsors for today, so thank you very much to TicketSolve. In a moment, you will hear from Annalise Kerr, but first it's my job to explain to you how today will work. We are live streaming this opening keynote to London, hence the big countdown clock that I keep looking at, because when that reaches 0, we go to London. At the end of the keynote, there will be a Q&A, so please prepare questions. Now, there's not just one way to ask questions today. Oh no, that would be far too boring. There are 2 ways to ask questions. The first is the old-fashioned put your hand up, I point at you, you get a roving mic, you say your name and your organisation, and you ask your question. The second is via Slido. So please, I would highly recommend right now, if you haven't done so already, to download the Slido app from the App Store. Once you've downloaded the app, enter the event code #AMAFutureNow. So delegates in London and Glasgow can use the app to both ask questions and then vote on questions that are coming up throughout the day. Oh, the countdown clock is telling me 38, 37, 36, 30. No pressure. Anyway, it now gives me the greatest pleasure to introduce globally renowned futurist and author Annalise Kerr. Did I get the pronunciation right? Good. Annalise will open Future Now with a look at where the arts and culture sector and our audiences might be heading. She will share her research and experience of consumer mindsets and trends, helping us to future gaze towards new possibilities in the marketing space. So I would like to very much introduce our first speaker for today, Annalise, and we just have to wait, I think, 50 seconds so London can join us, but we'll let Annalise come up, get herself comfortable, and thank you all. I will be back at question time. 40 seconds away.
Thank you very much, Jane. Great. Well, I would just like to say that I am delighted to be here and see so many people. Hope that you will have an inspired journey and really connect to the topic of future now, because the future is already here. It's just a little bit unevenly distributed. And I hope that I can give you all a few sound nuggets to get inspired. And please come to talk to me in the break. I've decided to be here all day because it's such exciting content. So now we are on to London. I would like to say thank you so much, Anna, for inviting me here. It's actually my second AMA event. I also spoke at Gateshead many years ago, and really, really inspiring. Now, when we look at today's society, perhaps one of our biggest challenges is navigating complexity. And I like this quote by the philosopher Marshall McLuhan, who said that we march backwards into the future. And I tend to agree with him that we somehow tend to look at the past and the present in order to understand the future. We live in a very liquid society where personal and, I would say, public is blurring, and that creates, I would say, loads of information, lots of pressure on people to navigate a new complexity unseen before. And in this space, as a brand, as an organization, as an event maker, it is hard to get your voice heard. Less and less brands are perceived to be quite, I would say, meaningless. I think it's 1 in 5 brands that are perceived to make a difference to our life. And it's always good to think in this brand context, am I a brand that is meaningful to my audience, to the people who work for me, to all of my stakeholders? So that's a really important thing to sort of take away. So when we look at tomorrow's map of successful marketing, it's looking vastly different to that of the past. It will clearly evolve around emotional intelligence and meaningful dialogue, because even though that we live in that digital reality, people and our events often are, people definitely are analog, but so are mostly also our face-to-face meetings in the event space. Two interesting case studies here that I like to share. People who are thinking out of the box, because without doubt we need new thinking. The School of Life here in London, I found it very interesting. It started as an event where you could come and get good ideas for everyday life. It was the philosopher Alain de Botton, a psychologist, and also an artist that got together. They had two passions. One was lifelong learning, and the other one was emotional intelligence. And what is interesting is that Alain de Botton says that the pursuit of happiness, fulfillment, and human flourishing is the future of business. So think about that for a second. Another very interesting out-of-the-box thinking is the museum workouts. This is from New York. The Metropolitan Art Museum had a collaboration with Myra Kalman, who is an author and artist. And she has those sort of rather disruptive events in the museum space where she gets people to connect with the art, doing exercises in front of their favorite art pieces. But also it's a sort of opening up to getting both an emotional and a physical connection to the art piece. So I really like that. You might ask, so why is that relevant to me as a marketeer? I think it's relevant to just say those two case studies really illustrate a whole new way of thinking about the future, thinking about things that we didn't even, maybe contemplate that we needed. And now, of course, the School of Life and the museum workout are both raving successes. How did they do it? Well, probably they engaged in what I call multidimensional thinking. This is sort of a map of my brain. Obviously, I come from design, so per se, I'm perceived as a right brain thinker, emotional. Everything I say is visionary and tangible. But that's not true. We don't have a disconnected or a divided brain. We have a whole brain. But very often people are divided into neat little boxes. I spoke to Jane about this just before, that we say, oh, those are the left brain thinkers and those are the right brain thinkers. Everybody is creative and everybody can activate that creativity. And I think also that this multidimensional thinking is key to unleash the creativity or purpose of your organizations, the team you work with, and also inviting your audiences to participate in co-creating, interesting ideas for the future. Now, I guess also that when you look at how to tick the boxes, it's very important to have the capital P for profit. But if that is casting a big shadow over that of people, planet, which is also about community and purpose, we are not going to be in business. We need to really connect those 4 Ps in a meaningful way. And this is sort of a little mini introduction to the 4 P thinking, the multidimensional thinking. This is how my futurist brain works. I need to understand how all of the dots are interconnected. My trend atlas is basically getting all of the building blocks of the future into a system. Because I'm creative, I need a visual map of the future. Otherwise, I can't get it to make sense. So I look at trends in the scientific dimension, the social dimension, which is typically the sort of left brain drivers. But what is interesting about the future is that you cannot, I would say, quantify it because it hasn't happened yet. So we have all, I would say, the play, the freedom of creativity in the early stages of planning our map of the future. But we also need to tap into people's emotional landscape and their values, which I call the spiritual dimension. This is how you get a fully fledged map over the future, because with so many data out there, so much information, our key challenge is how do we connect the dots in a meaningful context that really can make sense to my organizations, what I do. And we're really short of tools. So for us as futurists, the trend map gives us an idea of where the different, I would say, building blocks of the future might live, and then we can connect them in a meaningful space. So I did just that, and you will have my presentation, play around with it. I'm just giving you the fast-forward introduction to how to think, work, and play like a futurist, because you need those skills in order to do great marketing, connect with people, use all of those building blocks from the trend atlas and then connect them into this. I saw somebody shaking their head. Don't worry about reading this. It's just to understand that when you look at a trend, they are all interconnected and it's quite complex. It is about multi-channel communication, analog and digital. And this is all of the dots that you need to connect in the new space. It's a circular model. In the past, it was very sort of, I would say, linear the way we were thinking, but that is the model of the future. I have collected 8 trends I'd like to share with you and some case studies around what does it mean to take trends into the way I look at my event. Whether you work in the theater business, in arts, whether you work in, let's say, music events or any event, you need to really think about what are the key drivers of today that will still be relevant in, let's say, 2 to 5 years' time, so you can prepare for the future. So, the first very key trend here is that of creative leadership, and it is about applying design thinking principles to how we solve the problems of the future. A lot of people talk about design thinking. It's very simple. Design thinking is a methodology using creativity to think out of the box and using also creativity to solve potential problem or challenges of the future. It's also key to future-proof your business, because if you just do business as usual, the linear way, you won't get there. Now, I also believe that creativity is what keeps organizations ahead. So no matter what industry you are in, you need to really use that creativity to unleash the power of the people who work in your organization, but also to invite all your shareholders, your ecosystem of participants and I would say event goers into that space. How can we co-create with them? Great case study here is Iceland. They had, of course, the financial crisis. They had the volcano eruption. So they were pretty squeezed for coming up with good ideas for the future. So they decided they wanted to revive tourism. They took a local agency in Iceland, and then they collaborated with an agency in London. And the strategy was to connect to fans of Iceland globally, and they created the Iceland Academy. That was just a fun, bold initiative to get people to, be online. But the video they created in 2016 had 3 million views in a very short time, and 7,000 people went online to this it's just a gimmicky academy to learn how to avoid hot tub awkwardness, to travel safe in Iceland, and also how to be more a responsible traveler. And this actually doubled really the visitors, and it's ongoing, and they've sort of extended this. But I think it's very inspirational. It's about thinking out of the box, because really, no matter what industry you're in, very often the first touch point with your customer or your event goer will actually be the one that's online. So a top-notch online reputation is super, super important, but also don't just do the talk, also do the walk. And I will get to that in just a second. Who are tomorrow's people? Well, I like to call them global citizens, because if they don't travel physically, at least they travel on the internet. And global citizens are not just defined by age, gender, or ethnicity. In fact, we do not define people in that way anymore. We celebrate diversity. When you look at the younger generation, they look at diversity of thoughts, diversity of basically anything, because we are in a society where ideas and community is the new social currency. Now, a lot of people are speaking about the inclusive economy, and what I talk about here is very much about understanding that we have much more in common than what we think. And this is a very interesting I would say initiative. Is a video I'd like to share with you that TV2 in Denmark thought that perhaps it was getting very much like an echo chamber, and they wanted really to show and share that they have understood what diversity really means. So this is a great honor to share this video with you, and I will just click it here.
All that we share.
It's easy to put people in boxes. There's us, and there's them, the high earners, and those just getting by, those we trust, and those we try to avoid. There's the new Danes, and those who've always been here. There are those we share something with, and those we don't share anything with.
Velkommen. Jeg kommer til at stille jer nogle spørgsmål i dag. Nogle af dem kan godt være lidt personlige, men jeg håber, I vil svare ærligt på dem. Hvem herinde i rummet var klassens klovn?
And then suddenly, there's us. We who believe in life after death. We who've seen UFOs. And all of us who love to dance. We who've been bullied. And we who've bullied others. And then there's us, the lucky ones who've had sex this past week. We who are bisexual. And we who acknowledge the courage of others. And then there's all of us who just love Denmark. So maybe there's more that brings us together than we think. TV2 Denmark.
And I just want to say that this was a moving one. Everybody throughout the world, it went viral. Everybody was really raving about this. And there's a longer version online. I guess as a marketeer, everybody can learn a little bit from this event. Now, what we are talking about is clearly the concept of new models, because increasingly people want to be part of something bigger than themselves. It's almost like sort of a spiritual connection. But it is that idea that when we work together, we are stronger. So organizations clearly need to engage in an open dialogue with their audience. And really the question is, how do you do that? I think it would be central to any communication strategy, to any brand fabric, that almost that idea of community is what keeps, it's the glue that keeps the whole thing together. This is IKEA's Space 10. It's an innovation lab. And what they do, they work with a designer, global visionary thinkers, and also a network of contributors who just love IKEA. And what they did here was that they then talked to people in open dialogue. How can we make this a better world? How can we, try to protect, food security, reduce, waste, wellness, etc., etc. And on the question of urbanization, they built this growth room, which actually during the time as a connection with community, you can download this growth room DIY, and then you can sit inside. It's basically, normally you go to IKEA to the shop and buy a thing, but here they said to you can have it for free. But this is just Space 10 from IKEA, and they really connect with the community, and it's been a raving success. But it's also about story doing. People believe less and less in what you say and much more in what you do. So I think marketeers can't just tell the story anymore. They also have to do this story, and the impact is significantly different. So if you have an event, you literally have before the event the analog thing. Maybe you get together, and create an event around it. You then have during the event and after the event. And the idea is that the event never ends. It sort of goes into the next one. This idea that you keep the dialogue open. How many of you have heard of the Rain Room or been there? See some hands? Oh, a few of you. I took this case because in 2012 it was firstly shown at the Barbican in London. And it's interesting, there was 4 or 5 hours queue when I was there. It became the most Instagram, the social media shared piece ever. And obviously, it was so successful that it brought on this the trend of immersive exhibition. And also, the Color Factory in New York, Museum of Ice Cream, was sort of, I would say, inspired by that, literally art selfie factories. But what is also interesting is that it's so successful. 3 years ago when I was in New York, we literally had people queuing around the block for up to 5 hours in the rain to get into the Rain Room. And you walk in the rain, the sensor detects that you are there, so you can walk in the rain without getting wet. And in May, when I visited Los Angeles, I was at LACMA. I just got to hear that they have bought the piece as a part of their SR initiative to sort of say, well, we know that there is a drought in California, so they bought it as a part of that. So I think it's very interesting, the idea of not just telling the story, doing the story, thinking about how you can be analog, digital in everything you do. Now, economics for humans, this is perhaps my most favorite trend, and it's very much about a much more values-driven agenda, cultivating betterness in business. Less is sometimes more. And I also see a scenario that doing good is about new leaders saying, I don't just want to be the best in the world, I also want to be the best for the world. And this video here is an interesting one. I'm not going to be showing it, but do look it up. It is a Volvo campaign for the new car, really emotionally connecting with their audiences. It sets to a speech by the philosopher and thinker Alan Watts from 1959, and it basically encourages us to reconnect with our youth passion to live life fully now, because sometimes we are so busy just being busy, and that is not what economics for humans is about. And remember that people will always support initiative that speaks to their integrity and values. I guess this is about a bigger picture. It's about well-being capital. Well-being is a keyword in many scenarios, and I have recently been at a huge social media event in May in Helsinki, Ping Festival, where I spoke to about 1,250 people getting together to talk about the future of marketing. So there were the marketeers, but there were also the companies. And it was celebrated, part of it there in the sauna. And interesting about this space was the sauna culture, public sauna culture was kind of disappearing. So some star architects got to do this. And it was like a ritual event, but it's very interesting to be there. And in fact, it brought about a whole new trend of doing very inspiring, saunas in Helsinki. Now, connecting the P for people, planet, purpose, and also understanding how we best connect them. We have, of course, those amazing digital tools. The digital transformation have given us, a great potential to help empowering people, but also to create richer experiences. This is one of my favorite art installations. I don't know if any of you been there in Aarhus. It was actually a bold move. It's done back in 2011. A permanent art installation on the top of the building. The artist Olaf Fogh Eliasson. And basically Aarhus, the second biggest town in Denmark, was so fed up being in the shadow of Copenhagen, so they did that. And also Aarhus was the year's cultural capital, and around Aarhus a lot of events were evolving around doing things differently for the future. I guess that it was very, very successful, and I think we have to understand that social media, okay, we have the potential to reach a lot of people, but also people are harder to engage. So this is a very good example of how you can use the digital and the analog and connecting it really, and using art as the sort of bridge to connect that, I would say, seamless experience. Seamless experiences, doing things in a new way, I guess that's also a very, very important trend. This is the last of the 8 trends here. We are looking at a liquid society where seamless, personal, and real-time solution has become buzzwords. And when we look in the event spaces, C2 International, it's a new event, a cultural event in Montreal. It is basically a business conference with a difference, as you can tell from this. This is Ernst & Young having a brainstorm meeting blindfolded. So you take a very, I would say, sort of tough business nose man and put him or her in this space, and you will get a very different experience. And this is very much about creativity and commerce, again, bringing design thinking to the forefront. Now, to sort of round off here and connect the dots in a meaningful way, I've given you a lot of new ideas to sort of, think about. But if you were taking 2 things away from this presentation, I would say, remember the Trend Atlas is a map to orientate yourself about where the world is going. You could take different values, different trends. I have then made here for you a little marketing map, a tick box for what you need to be aware of. Because when we connect the dots in the 4P context of people, planet, purpose, and profit or performance, We need to look at the key drivers of change and also the values. And that's what I've done here. And it's a good way for you to start, because I would say to any marketeers, the most important thing is to have a strategy, to have a plan. And once you have that, you can always deviate and turn it up, turn it down. But without a plan, with all the information that's out there, it's going to be very, very difficult to navigate the landscape of connecting with people. So when we look to the rational drivers, the rational touch points of our audiences of tomorrow, it's about building social capital, because creativity and community drive innovation, and also it connects people. You need to be the human interface, empower people, and bring exciting new experiences. Think about the two first case studies I presented to you, Museum Workout and the School of Life. Great way of thinking differently about the future. Looking to the emotional touch point of tomorrow's marketing map, show you care, because when people know you care, they care too. And last but not least, really invite meaningful dialogue. Don't be scared of what people will tell you. Embrace that as information that you can better yourself. And also, people really do tend to team up with brands that talk to them in this emotional context, because it's about being meaningful and have relevant content. And last but not least, all of you in here can be active change makers. And I hope you will go away with a little bit of inspiration to do just that. It only takes one person, one great idea. But of course, all of us, depending on what context we work in, what organizations we work in with, we are all embarking on a unique journey in which we take control and ownership over the future that we want to happen. And it isn't just the one-man show. Together we are stronger. And remember, the future isn't just somewhere you go. You make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
You'll stay here?
Absolutely.
Because you've got a lapel mic and I haven't. And I will stay here, and we will open the floor to questions in both Glasgow and London. Yes, please. That would be great.
Take my notes.
I'm going to Slido.
So in case there are no questions on Slido, do you have any question on the audience? Maybe think about some questions, and yeah.
So, oh, I see somebody in a hand in the audience asking a question. Right up back there. Name and your organisation, please.
It's the baby asking a question. I can see it.
Yeah, no, she asked me to pass it on. My name's Karen. I'm from the Citizens Theatre in Glasgow. When creating your trend map, where are your favourite places to look to identify those trends to fill that map?
So the Trend Atlas has been in the make. I just made my A4 summary of the future. I've been working for 30 years in the business, but I guess it started by really going to great places. I mean, obviously, when I work in design, I go to the usual suspect. I go to to New York, to Paris, to Rome. But eventually, I found out that there were many little undiscovered places. So really, Iceland had been a great experience to me to go there. But also in the hills of Norway, I found some really fantastic people. There were recently a very interesting documentary called Northern Disco Lights. So it was very much about this whole workshop, new sound from Norway, because they were in the hills and they couldn't quite get it right. But they created a whole new way of thinking. Bergen has been very interesting for me because of a very strong DJ scene. Very well-known musicians will go and DJ there, so you can meet them in the space. In Iceland, of course, I met Sigur Rós, coincidentally. I was just behind them in the queue. But also, I was recently in Singapore. Also interesting to see. So I think there isn't just one place. It's a little bit like surfing the internet. You go to one place, then you go to another place, and then you meet nice people. But when you sort of connect to people like me, like sort of similar one, you get to see what you like in your own context, in a different context. But I also like to go and disrupt, to see things that I've not heard about before. So I guess that anywhere.
Thank you. There's some great questions coming in Slido. I'm just having a look at them now. I'll go to the top one from Anonymous. You mentioned a liquid society. Can you say a bit more about what that is?
Yes, it's actually Zygmunt Bauman, the sociologist. He came up with the idea of the liquid society, that everything becomes very fluid. We don't know actually when the program is ending. We are constantly online. Private and work and leisure is blending. You know, when do we switch off? When do we switch on? We hardly know that anymore. So also in that new liquid society where everything becomes much more like a sort of connecting the dots, it becomes more circular, we tend to have a whole different way of approaching things, and the next generation as well will have much more that liquid thinking.
And the next question, I have to ask it from Slido because it's so good and it's had some votes. You talk about tech connecting people, but it's also had a role in dividing people in our increasingly polarised political environment. Is that trend a worry?
I think if, you know, anything can be a worry. It depends whether your glass is half full or half empty. I would say that what I also emphasize is that you cannot just connect to people in the digital space. You have to understand the analog way. And this is also why I'm thinking that if you're aware of that as a marketeer, that it can have a divide, make sure that you use multiple media. Don't go away from good old analog marketing. Still have that as a parallel, because then you can maybe avoid the divide. And I think it is something to be very, very aware of, like my video, all that we share. Really make that maybe your next 24 months mission, to understand how you can really balance the analog with the digital.
Do I have any more questions in the room just now? Or shall I keep going on? Yes, one down here. Your name and where you're from, please.
That's good.
It's Michael from the Scottish Chamber Orchestra.
Hi, Michael.
Hi. You mentioned global citizens as a concept, and it's quite a powerful idea. But how... so you mentioned New Age diversity, and was it No Age society?
Yes.
But is it useful to think along those terms if we're, for example, audience segmentation is such a powerful tool for marketeers, and when we're communicating and planning communications, is it difficult for us to think about people with, I guess, yeah, segmentation is very powerful. So how do we think, or could you expand on your global citizens idea?
I think we had a very interesting conversation before, Jane and I, because first of all, global citizens are perhaps people who are, so I'm Danish-Swedish, so I've lived in Germany, I worked in Asia, and now I live in London, and yeah, so I am a global citizen, and so is my son. He's actually Colombian, Danish, born in London, now he lives in Edinburgh. So those are the global citizens. It's nothing to do with an age. It's to do with the mindset that we like to travel. As the lady Karen asked me about, where is it great to go? And I guess that idea of fluidity and, you know, geographical boundaries are dissolving, that's very, very powerful. And also, let me assure you that if you have an organization that is not diverse in terms of employing people from different age groups, different sexual orientation, different nationalities, different kind of thoughts, the left brain thinkers, the right brain thinkers, the engineer, the hyper-creative, all of those, you know, this idea of the inclusion is the most powerful thing, because that is what drives creativity. And the global citizen, like my son, he's 22, I got actually 4 kids, so 3 of them are bonus kids. It's like the bonus you get when you marry again and when you don't ask for. But I'm very lucky, I have 4 kids. They all have that mindset. And I guess that the global citizens are a group where you look more at tribes and not at age. I'm 56 years old, I'm proud to say that, but I still hope I'll be working till I'm 100, you know. Forecast saying I would probably another 46 or 44 years.
Fingers crossed.
So I just want you to think that it is a whole new way, and when we open up to new I would say places to go. I mean, I went to Thailand, to the Thai Design Center. It was the most trendy place I've ever been. It was better than the Danish Design Center. So it's just, it doesn't matter where you go, but the way you connect the dots and that idea of being a global citizen, if you can't go for one reason because of family or budget or whatever, you can always get on the internet, you can meet with people locally from somewhere else. It's about creating new communities across what we think as what we will normally do. So make the familiar unfamiliar and learn new things. That's the way to become a global citizen.
Annalise, I have to ask you this question. It's zooming up the charts. Do you have any advice on creating a culture of future thinking in an organisation specifically?
I'm going to do a little bit of marketing now. I do, because I realized that after 30 years of telling people about the future, I now invite people into the Care Academy. It's going to be launched at the beginning of next year, to help people how to think, work and play like a futurist. And more than anything, we are creating a community where we talk with people about different ways of thinking out of the box, because without our community, we are really nothing. And we really also have to understand that that diversity is what drives innovation culture in our organization. We always say, oh, we don't have a budget. It doesn't have, you don't need a budget to be creative. It just starts with an idea, and as a design thinker myself, if basically you don't have any money, you can always come up with ideas. You can have a brainstorm, a walk storm, you can go out. There is really no limitation, only creativity sets the limit, you know, your own creativity.
So many good questions here. Are there any more from the floor just now, or shall I keep going with Slido? Keep going with Slido, because you're probably seeing them coming up. Let's ask the second, you want to be asked that one. Do you think design thinking is something that arts organisations should be thinking about?
Yes, because I just said that. Remember, my father always said, when fisherman can't go to sea, he meant his nets. So every day think about one good idea where you can improve your organisation. And don't think what you did yesterday or the day before, this rare mirror view. Think about, okay, we tried all of those things, that didn't work. Can we think in a new way? Can we even invite the lady from the canteen or the bookkeeper? Because when I look at the best case study of design thinking, an architect's firm in Oslo, Snøhette, they did the opera house up there, they actually have this scheme where everybody is invited in to think about the future. So nobody can complain, I wasn't included. So let the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer, or the basically CFO, the finance officer, he would actually be asked to be part of the research team for a new building. And then he could take a leave of 3 months from doing the bookkeeping. Somebody else would do his job. And then he would be able to step into somebody else's shoe and understand what it means to be more creative. So it's this idea of maybe swapping jobs within your organization. Maybe even if you're 3 people, at least you can try to sort of, you know, but if you're a big organization, you can also do it. But yes, design thinking is key, and think about it simple. It's just a tool for creativity to flourish.
Annalise, thank you so very much. I think that's all the questions we probably have time for, which is such a shame, because you can see how many of them are coming up from, you know, both here in Glasgow and via Slido. I just want to thank you so much for everything
welcome.
You've given us today. You've certainly made me think about, you know, categorising people differently by asking different questions. Were you the class clown? Well, rather than, you know, asking them, you know, the traditional questions maybe we use to segment. The next session in this theatre will be Rickert Schroer from the New York Public Library, talking about his Insta success. So stay here if you're going to that. And you can also check the programme that's around your neck for what else is happening next. So thank you once again, Annalise.
Thank you. Great question.